In a world that has been tainted by groups of dark beings, corruption, secrecy, and depravity have altered and damaged the lives of many children and adults who have fallen victim to stolen identities. For many years, children have been abducted and sometimes swapped out at a young age. In different instances, they are placed into foster care, witness protection programs, sold to dark handlers, sex trafficked, or sacrificed. Sadly, this is far more common than we have been led to believe. People of influence and children with parents who are prominent public figures have been especially targeted because of their wealth and power to influence others. Many are taken, then given new identities. Identity theft is frequently used by the cabal, replacing important or wealthy people with clones or fake body doubles. They do this for many reasons, the first being that the body doubles are easy to control, like puppets on a string. The second is to steal the original individual's wealth and fortune, rendering them impoverished and helpless. The cabal also enjoy messing with and traumatizing their victims, leaving them nameless, poor, completely alone and on the verge of insanity. These dark ones feed off the pain and suffering of others. So many children of stolen identities do not get to grow up. However, some of the lucky ones who survived are now adults and are bravely stepping forward and speaking their truths for the world to hear. And it is our job to listen. John Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr. is one of these extraordinary brave individuals with an extreme case of stolen identity. This is his story. The story of John is a difficult one to tell. It is filled with loss, pain, and immense suffering. Furthermore, because John was subjected to MK-Ultra, drugs, torture, and copious other traumatic experiences, some timelines are approximations. John Jr. was born in 1960 to one of the most powerful and well-known families in the world, the Kennedys. He was born shortly after his father became the President of the United States of America. John has only a few short memories of his father, which he holds close to his heart to this day. Initially, he lived a good life, supported and safe in the sanctuary of the White House, surrounded by family who loved, cherished, and cared for him dearly. Although he was often under the care and supervision of nannies, Secret Service agents, and White House staff. In 1963, at the tender age of 3, John Jr.'s world came crashing down and was forever changed when his father was assassinated. It was a headline that both shocked and broke the hearts of many people around the world, but most of all, John and his family.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You'll excuse the fact that I'm out of breath, but about 10 or 15 minutes ago, a tragic thing, from all indications at this point, has happened in the city of Dallas. Let me quote to you this. And you'll excuse me if I am out of breath. A bulletin, this is from the United Press, from Dallas. President Kennedy and Governor John Connally have been cut down by assassins' bullets in downtown Dallas. They were riding in an open automobile when the shots were fired. The president, his limp body carried in the arms of his wife, Jacqueline, has rushed to Parkland Hospital.
Between the ages of 3 and approximately 8 to 10, John had an exceptionally convoluted life. He spent time flying around the world with his mother, Jacqueline Kennedy, attending opulent events with important people, including celebrities, politicians, royalty, and other influential people. He would take classes with famous actors and various renowned artists, as well as perform acting roles in Hollywood on the big screen.
The 2 candidates for gargoyleship will step forward. Candidate Tracy, are you ready to take the chicken test?
What's a chicken test? Boy, are you a dum-dum. It's a test to see if you're chicken.
Gargoyle arms, bring forward the basket of snakes.
At times, this meant that John had to go and live with his movie or TV family for weeks at a time to get him into the role. However, it was not all fun and games for John. He was also put in extremely traumatic situations, even when in the presence of his mother. When John was 5 or 6, he remembers one of these traumatic times. He was traveling on a plane to New York with Jackie's double security and Secret Service agents. During the flight, John witnessed his mother being brutally violated by one of the men, while the others stood by and watched. John was screaming and crying hysterically. The men told John that if he would not shut up, they would kill his mother. John was later beaten for getting upset. When John was 5 years old, he recalls being dropped off at an old two-storied home that had been converted into a small school. He was instructed to sleep the night in the bedroom upstairs. That evening, a man visited him during the night and sexually violated him. When John was picked up the following day, he explained how his backside hurt to the couple who were commissioned to escort him to his next location. The man appeared completely unfazed, as he casually stated, "Forget it, kid. That's the way it goes." John had an unstable upbringing in every way possible. He was continuously instructed with no notice to pack his bag and travel to a destination unknown. This continued well into his teens and young adult life. John never knew a normal or consistent home environment, and he was often left feeling confused and afraid, not knowing where he was or what was going on. When John was young, he recalled overhearing a conversation between adults who were discussing their ownership over him. He was shocked. During this meeting, John was sold to a man named Wayne. Wayne was to be his handler and, in some respects, his teacher. Later on, Wayne paid for John to enter into the care of a new family called the Quigleys. From age 5, John was introduced to the Hells Angels by Wayne. John had a huge love and interest in motorbikes since he was a little boy and still does to this day, being a skilled rider and mechanic among many other things. Throughout John's life, he spent time at the Hells Angels clubhouses and later became a patched member himself. John refers to the Hells Angels as his family and the members as his brothers. They were the family that he never really had, offering him a safe haven, comradeship, and a sense of belonging. The Hells Angels have played a big part in John's adult life too. He recalls many moments where members stuck up for him and even saved his life from assassination attempts on more than one occasion. From age 6, John attended St. David's private school in New York, attending on and off. This continued for his entire childhood, only being consciously present for no more than a few weeks out of a year. Of course, being under the influence of MK Ultra from a young age means that he may have been there more often than he can recall. When John turned 8 years old, his mother Jacqueline married Aristotle Socrates Onassis on the Greek island of Skorpios. Aristotle was a Greek-Argentinian shipping typhoon. Onassis was one of the world's wealthiest and well-known public figures at the time, building the world's largest privately owned shipping fleet amidst his strong association with organized crime. One of John's fond memories of that time was going on archaeological digging expeditions. One instance was when John, Onassis, Wayne, Jackie, and a team visited the tomb of Alexander the Great's father, Philip II of Macedon. After the initial excitement, John recalls feeling very disappointed as he watched the digging team loot the site, taking ancient artifacts including precious metals, gemstones, and superior ancient technology devices. These ancient technologies could do incredible futuristic things, including seeing future events and outcomes within the current timeline. Of course, these items were kept secret within the mafia cabal, with only the scraps being made public. Between the ages of 8 and 10 was an extremely dark and unsettling time for John, a theme that continued for many more years to come. At this time, John was introduced to the Quigley family as a part of the Witness Protection Program. John was given a new name and birth date. He was now to answer to David Keith Quigley, and his birth year was 1966 instead of 1960. During this time, John was unable to celebrate his birthday. He was also given a cocktail of puberty blocker hormones to keep him looking young and to marry up with his new birth date and identity. The Quigleys even bleached John's hair and made him write using his right hand, as he was naturally left-handed. During his time with the Quigleys, John experienced and witnessed terrible horrors and abuse. The Quigleys were a cabal organized crime family. They lived in a closed community in Yosemite Lakes in California, along with other group members. They were all members of secret societies, including the Illuminati and the Freemasons. All of the families within the gated community were either public figures themselves, connected or related to important and influential people. Regardless of their title, They were all in the same satanic club, one way or another. During John's time living in the closed community with the Quigley family, he experienced and witnessed frequent satanic rituals. During these rituals, the group would gather in a large tent in the middle of the night under moon and candlelight. Here, they would collude and plan out future agendas, and then energetically enhance the manifestation using dark witchcraft, human sacrifice, sexually violating children and torturing them, among other things. In his time with the Quigleys, John was thrown knee-deep into a world of crime and darkness. He had many near-death experiences, which were all deliberate attempts on his life, but a higher force kept him alive to tell his story. He witnessed money laundering and counterfeiting, murder, torture, sexual abuse, pedophilia, and people disappearing without a trace. John was beaten often and saw a lot of children come and go within the community. He suspected these children were abducted and trafficked. Some were given new identities, while others were used in rituals, never to be seen again. There was one instance that John recalled vividly, where a small child came to stay at the Quigleys' house. John recalls being hysterical in his room, hearing the child being brutally harmed and then killed by Max and Dorothy Quigley. This was some kind of a spirit-cooking child sacrifice ritual, where they were attempting to capture the child's spirit or essence as the child passed over. In this instance, John was beaten terribly by Dorothy for crying loudly in his locked room. John never saw that child again. However, Max did take out some heavy-duty trash bags the next morning. Furthermore, it should be noted that the Quigleys' homestead had pigs, which they used as tools to dispose of human remains and evidence of their heinous crimes. John witnessed countless body doubles and cases of identity theft of the people around him. While with the Quigleys, and afterwards too, he distinctly recalls Dorothy Quigley paying a woman to take her place, using her identity for an upcoming court hearing and an impending prison sentence. That woman was disposed of just prior to serving Dorothy's sentence on her behalf. This was done to minimize the risk of the woman exposing her while she was serving her time. At around the age of 10, while John was attending school on and off, a boy around his age showed up and sat next to him in class. His name was George, but was over time referred to as John John. John John was John Jr.'s body double, and the imposter that was tasked with stealing John's identity over the coming years. John was told that John John was his stepbrother. Later as an adult, John suspected that John John was the bastard son of Aristotle Onassis and one of his mistresses. Needless to say, they didn't get along very well. However, over the years, they were forced to hang out together on different occasions for photo ops. John was also a part of MK Ultra mind control experiments. In the early 70s, the CIA were implementing different forms of mind control. One of the now publicly released papers details Project Artichoke, which was a MK Ultra psyop and is still being used in different capacities to this day. Around the age of 10, John was taken by Max and Dorothy Quigley to an old military facility. Here, he underwent a procedure that entailed removing a small section of his skull, which was then put back in place and dressed, after inserting a small microchip-type device. After this procedure, he lost what little was left of his personal autonomy. John was taken along as an accessory and witness in multiple crimes, and forced to do things against his will. Just one of these horrific instances was when he was locked in a bathroom with a lifeless body lying in the bathtub beside him. He was not allowed to leave the room until he cut up the body into small pieces to be disposed of. Trigger words were used by his handler Wayne, as well as other people, who had authority to put John under. Under is the term John uses for when he was under the influence of MK Ultra. It is a foggy, dreamlike state, where the victim is put on autopilot, except someone else holds the steering wheel. Under MK Ultra, a person has very little self-control over their actions. However, some awareness and memories do remain, especially if that is part of the planned programming and narrative. John has many instances where he would remember certain events and experiences, but would be unsure of if or when they happened. At times, he recollects disappearing for weeks, but would only come to know this upon speaking to fellow school pupils, neighbors, and friends within his community. John was a witness and an accessory to countless crimes and murders while under MK Ultra mind control, and only has small snippets of memories that burn in his mind to this day. Between the age of 10 and 15, and again as an adult, John spent a lot of time in Atlantic City on the boardwalk with his handler and mentor, Wayne. In this time, he was being taught the ins and outs of the organized crime network. It was John's understanding that he was being positioned to one day take over the criminal underground that ran Atlantic City. However, that never came to pass. When John was 13, he was spending a lot of time on the island of Scorpios with Aristotle Onassis, his mother Jacqueline, and Aristotle's two children, Alexander and Christina. John got on well with and looked up to Aristotle's son, Alexander. Sadly, one day in a horrible turn of events, Alexander was shot at point blank by a plane mechanic while on a short private flight. The plane had only just taken off and was approximately 30 feet off the ground when Alexander was killed, sending the plane crashing down on the tarmac and rendering the perpetrator unconscious. John witnessed the whole thing. He tried to help his stepbrother, but he was unsuccessful. After the plane came to a halt, John held Alexander in his arms, sobbing uncontrollably, while he awaited rescue services to retrieve them. Not long after Alexander's murder, John moved back in with the Quigleys for approximately 18 months. Meanwhile, Aristotle and Jackie made a big move to Bullhead City, Arizona, to start fresh and establish what was to be their new empire. In early 1975, John left the Quigleys to go with his mother and stepfather in Arizona. He was excited for his future for the first time in a long time. Things were finally looking up for John and his family. In March of 1975, when John was 15, his stepfather, Aristotle Onassis, was brutally murdered. He was gruesomely hacked to death with a camping axe in Arizona by a group of teenagers aged 8 to 18, who later went on to become superstars of Hollywood. John witnessed his stepfather's bloodied and lifeless body and was distraught. Later that year, John witnessed the deafening tones of his mother Jacqueline being shot 3 times in the office of their home in Bullhead City. John was beyond repair. He was completely heartbroken. His mother was all he had left. The federal agents who carried out Jackie's murder proceeded to openly discuss in front of a hysterical 15-year-old John how they were going to take his mother's stocks. They then threatened John at gunpoint to sign off on the murder of his mother. John did not sign the document, as a man with authority burst into the room just in the nick of time and took John away. With no family to go to, John was now heading back to live with the Quigleys. Meanwhile, Jacqueline Kennedy's body double assumed her lead role as Jackie, taking her identity, her wealth, and family heirlooms as if they were her own. Many unimaginable things happened to John throughout his life. As a young man, he was once sedated with chloroform by a gangster turned pastor and musician named Charlie Brown. He was then given a vasectomy on the kitchen table at the Quigleys' home, with their blessing and assistance, of course. The vast number of inhumane crimes that were committed against John throughout his life is both terrifying and compelling. A short time after the Charlie Brown incident, John recalls another disturbing story. Lisa, who was John's wife for a short time and who he later discovered was a member of a satanic cult, had conceived a child. It was a boy they named David. John knew that this child was not his biological son, as he had already had an involuntary vasectomy thanks to Charlie Brown and the Quigleys. He was also aware that Lisa was seeing other men, but at this time, he was too messed up to care. When David was just a baby, Lisa went away for a short while and returned with a different baby altogether. By this point, John was getting very good at spotting when someone in his life had been swapped out and replaced. He was horrified but got nowhere arguing the point. So John carried on. He loved and cared for David as his own. John did his best to provide for his son, But he was going through another difficult time. He was now living in poverty with David, while Lisa went out with strange men, drinking throughout the night. Eventually, the Quigleys coerced John into signing off on them adopting David, who they poisoned and tortured over the years. This continued until 2012, when John was able to take him back into his care indefinitely. John survived multiple attempts on his life and kidnappings for ransom. Secret government agents were the most common perpetrators of John's kidnapping experiences. Secret Service agents and other authorized agency staff had access to John's whereabouts through a tracking chip, and were often tasked with driving and relocating John to different locations. On different occasions, John was beaten, drugged, starved, poisoned, and even kept in a dog cage. Of course, Jackie would always pay to have him released. Despite all this, John survived with a heart as pure as gold, and he only grew stronger each time. When John was 35, he went with Wayne to see Jackie's double and replacement. She was very ill and told them that she was sure that the children had been poisoning her. By children, she was referring to John and his wife Carolyn Bassett, who John himself had heard on an audio recording plotting to kill him and Jackie to take what remained of the family wealth. A short while later in May 1995, Jackie's double passed away in her bed. John visited again with Wayne. When he saw that her mouth was gaping open, John tied his bandana around fake Jackie's jaw and head, prying her mouth gently shut to conserve her dignity. This was when her current partner, Maurice Templesman, walked in the room and accused John of Jackie's death. Of course, John knew that it was John and his wife Carolyn who had poisoned her. John and Carolyn then sold at auction to the highest bidder all of the remaining family heirlooms and valuable belongings of which Jackie had in her possession, making them over $30 million. Throughout John's entire adult life, he always worked hard to stay on his feet, but was always kept impoverished. Meanwhile, his double and the man who stole his identity, George aka John, lived a life of deviance and opulence, devouring John's rightful inheritance. When John was age 38, he was invited to fly out to attend a wedding that John, Carolyn Bassett, and her sister Lauren Bassett were going to. He was very reluctant to go with them and board the plane, as he already knew that John and Carolyn planned to kill him, but he went anyway out of curiosity. By this stage, John was already in deep trouble with the cabal. He had run out of money and was getting desperate. They all boarded the plane and were flying over the ocean when the plane's engine malfunctioned, sending them spiraling down towards the water below. John had just enough time and experience with plane crashes to fasten his seatbelt and put his life jacket on. He also directed Lauren, who was seated close to him, to do the same. That fatal plane crash killed John, Carolyn, and Lauren. John barely survived with his life while attempting to rescue Lauren, who fought him off and insisted on going back to the sinking vessel to retrieve her sister. Once again, John was saved by a higher force, as John has an important role to play yet. As an adult, John did his best to work hard and save money. He tried numerous times to get away from California and the Quigleys. He traveled around the country, hopping from place to place and from job to job, predominantly as a truck driver, a mechanic, and sometimes a construction worker. John never stayed in one place for long, as attempts on his life and his past continued to follow him wherever he went. During this time, John was betrayed by multiple girlfriends, who each revealed themselves to be dark setups. They were all colluding with the Quigleys and other unsavory characters within the cabal, with the intention to steal what little money and possessions John had, and to continuously bring him down into a low frequency. In one of these instances, Stacy, who was John's girlfriend at the time, tried to shoot him while he was in bed asleep. Thankfully, he woke up and stopped her. After failing the first time, she then proceeded to try and run him down with her car. In another instance, John was with a different girlfriend named Renee. One day, Renee's sister visited them out of the blue. She was distraught, saying things like, "That's not my sister. What have you done with my sister?" It was then that John realized that the Renee he thought he knew was in fact a body double. John was completely taken back by this, as he had trusted this woman. He also could not believe the lengths that the cabal went to mess with him and try to ruin his life again and again. Renee later was hired by the Quigleys, as if she wasn't already working for them in secret. The Quigleys attempted to kill John countless times throughout his life. They dropped him off at dangerous places, tried to get John's 3-year-old son David to shoot him. They beat him, poisoned him, drugged him, shot at him, drove him off the road. They rendered him infertile and coerced with other cabal members to take hits out on him throughout his life. But John persevered against all odds. The Quigleys were there at every turn to foil John's best-made plans. They helped orchestrate John's greatest downfalls. Then they were there to help him when everything fell apart. However, they always had ulterior motives, which were to torment, drain, and break John down. The Quigleys played a key role in keeping him broke, destitute, confused, and alone. Of course, they were merely the puppets of much darker unseen forces. John has had an incredibly traumatic, full, and interesting life. He has traveled the world and had many unique experiences that most people couldn't even begin to imagine in their wildest dreams. Or should I say, nightmares. John has mingled with some of the most well-known people in the world. He has memories of meeting the Queen of England, Elvis Presley, Princess Diana, the Obamas, Donald Trump and his double, Lynyrd Skynyrd, Dolly Parton, a young Lady Gaga, Prince William and Harry, the Eagles, AC/DC, Bill Gates, Clint Eastwood, John Wayne, Denzel Washington, the Clintons and Pablo Picasso, just to name a few. As time went by and things started to calm down a little, John began recording tapes of his story. The tapes were later stolen from his vehicle, but that did not stop John from getting his story out. Over time, John was able to distance himself more and more from the Quigleys and the cabal, but not entirely. In 2012, John became very unwell with acid reflux. He suspected that he had been poisoned. His doctor diagnosed him with a hiatal hernia, which required immediate surgery. When John woke up from the surgery, he had several holes in his stomach, instead of the 3 that he was told he would have. Upon further investigation, the X-rays revealed that John now had 3 sizable holes in his lungs and organs that were not there before. The hospital staff treated him terribly, refusing John his basic needs and pain medicine. They tried to keep him there for as long as possible. John eventually left, despite still being in recovery and tremendous pain. When John left the hospital with nowhere else to go, he went to see the Quigleys. He was not welcome. However, when he saw the state that his son David was in, he decided right then and there that he must take him away with him. They started looking for a place to live, and after a short while of searching, the pair bought a small home and settled down in Bullhead City, near where his mother was buried. In recent years, John started telling his story more and more on social media, coming up against countless attempts to censor and silence him. By 2023, John had produced an exceptionally well-written and revealing memoir titled Stolen Identity: Unveiling the Real John Kennedy Jr. In this book, John deep dives into many more vivid details about his life experiences, including his time spent in Black Ops in Vietnam, the people he met along the way, as well as unraveling the dark agenda behind the false awakening. That is, the Q movement. This documentary is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to John's story, which is a story that is equally thought-provoking and shocking, and it is far from finished. Sadly, John's experiences have been more often painful than not. However, John is now in a better place. He may not be wealthy yet, but he has the growing support of millions of people around the world. John is on a journey of healing physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, with the help of love and light frequencies. Despite being attacked and censored from all directions, John is working around the clock to get his story out to the masses, to expose the lies and corruption within the shadow government, the world elites, the cabal, secret societies, and organized crime syndicates, which are all interconnected, coexisting under the same dark satanic umbrella. John is passionate about bringing the truth into the light about who these dark ones are. and the evil that they have been committing from the shadows. He is seeking justice for not only himself, but for all innocents who have and still are experiencing stolen identities. I encourage you to take a deep dive into the truth through John's experiences. If you wish to purchase John's book to learn more about his story and to support him, please visit his website, therealjohnfkennedykr.com.
My name is John Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr. That's right, my father was the President of the United States. I wrote a book about what I've learned, what I've seen, and it is a huge achievement. It is huge because it affects all Americans. What they did to me, what they did to my loved ones, what they are doing to you, it affects us all. Struggle after struggle, being hindered, blocked, shadow banned, taken down, lions. I came on here specifically to tell you all thank you with all my heart, all my soul. I appreciate you all so very much, each and every one of you.
John is not a quitter. He is currently raising funds to have yet another DNA test done after multiple attempts that were tampered with. With the most recent results from a test that he purchased nearly 12 months ago, having still not been given to John. Together, let us expose the truth and end the tyranny and corruption perpetuated by the Dark Ones, by shining light into even the darkest of places. Full disclosure is happening now. We already won.